We're here today with Laura Klein. Laura, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And let me jump right into the first question. What are the primary reasons that UX research gets ignored?
So I think there are two major reasons why UX research gets ignored. I think too many people still think of research as it's a checkbox. It's a thing that you have to do or a thing that you want to do, but it's an extra thing. They don't yet think of it in the way that I think of it, which is the way we figure out what product we're going to build. That's what research is to me. It's a good way, it's actually the only way, I think, to really understand our market, our product, our customers, and to figure out what features are necessary and what we should be building at any given time. I think until we realize that it's one of the most important parts of the process, it's going to be too easy to ignore as long as it's just a checkbox. Oh yeah, I did my research. Okay, great. I think the other reason that it gets ignored is that it's still outsourced. And by outsourced, I mean it could be to a single user researcher in the company. It could be to a user research department. It could be to an agency. I think it's just too easy when something is being done by somebody else to think of them then as, oh, that's that other group, and they're going to give me a deliverable, and I'm not involved in the process. And then look at it this way: I have a product, and I want to do some research on it, and so I go to this agency and I say I want to do some research, and I talk to them for a little bit, and then they just disappear for 3 weeks. And then, 3 weeks later, they come back and they've got this big report, and they put this report on my desk. And, I work at startups, and at startups, 3 weeks is a lifetime. I'm done with that part of the product. I've made many decisions. I didn't wait around for 3 weeks to hear this report that somebody's going to give me back. And then, so I get this report, and then what am I supposed to do with it? I think it's just super easy to take that big report and just put it on a shelf and not act on it. I think it gets ignored because the way things are set up, it's just really easy to ignore it.
So you said it's outsourced. Why is it outsourced? Why is it so hard for people to do UX research?
So it's interesting. Nobody ever asks, why is it so hard to program computers? UX research is hard because it's hard. It's a whole discipline. It's something that people have been studying and doing for many, many years, and it's not a single thing. It's not like there's one correct way to do research and you just have to learn, this one technique. I think a lot of people, especially people who have been involved maybe with, usability tests or something, they think everything is just a task-based usability test. And while task-based usability tests are lovely, they are not the only kind of research one might do. And so, not to be tautological, but it's hard because it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and it's another thing for product managers or product owners, or entrepreneurs to have to learn a lot about this whole other discipline. Meanwhile they're learning about, programming, and they're learning about fundraising, and they're learning about markets and marketing, and there's just a lot of other stuff that they have to do. So I get that it's not the first thing on their list that they want to run out there and learn all about, but it is, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not necessary. Right? Nobody says, well, computer programming is really hard, so I think I'm going to build this app in some other way, right? No, you build it the right way, with programming and with research, even though they're hard.
Imagine a startup or engineering team interested in learning about its potential customers' needs. What should that team know before they interview their customers?
That team should know who their customers actually are. It's interesting because I know you've heard the phrase, get out of the building, meaning talk to people who aren't you or your friends. And I think that's a lovely sentiment, and I love the simplicity of it, but I think it gets misunderstood by a lot of people. And I think that misunderstanding has caused some problems. I think the misunderstanding is that as long as you're out of the building talking to people, that's enough. And it's not enough. You need to talk to your customers. You need to talk to the people that you think are going to be your customers in order to find out if they really are going to be your customers. You need to be validating your market. You need to be doing customer development, meaning with people who are likely to want your product. The example that I always give here is if you're doing something to do with cars and you talk to my mother and you talk to a NASCAR driver, the results that you're going to get are going to be somewhat different. And it's probably going to be pretty hard to make any product decisions based on questions that you have asked to my mother and to the NASCAR driver. So you need to figure out, am I talking to moms or am I talking to NASCAR drivers? And even when you're talking about, moms, or, you think that like, oh, it's a market, oh, it's, it's for women. Well, it turns out that you can think you have a market, but it's still way too big. You're still talking to way too broad of a segment of people. You need to narrow it down, and that's where I think things like personas can actually be really helpful in thinking about the kind of person that you want to be talking to. And once you've narrowed down your market and you know what kind of person you want to be talking to, I think that really helps the quality of the responses that you get, and it makes that research that much more actionable, because suddenly you're noticing patterns, you're getting similar answers from people, you're finding people who have common problems, and when you find common problems, you can solve those problems.
I'm hearing from people in the UX field that startup founders are hard to work with because they are, quote unquote, they know everything. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that knowing everything is not a trait that is unique to startup founders. I would say that startup founders are incredibly passionate. They have to be, right? They're doing something insane. So I think they're incredibly passionate about what they're building. They care very deeply. And I think there can be this very difficult moment where you come in as an outsider, you've done this research, you know that what you're doing is important and that you know that you've done it right. But essentially you're coming in and, you're telling them that their baby is ugly. And that's hard for anybody to hear. And so these are people who care very deeply about their baby, obviously, and you've just told them that it's ugly, and they can react poorly to that. I think that that's not because they're difficult people, and it's not because they know everything. I think, in fact, many of the startup founders that I've worked with are incredibly open to research. They desperately want to know how to make their product better. They want to make their baby the best baby they possibly can make it. You just have to help them to improve the baby. You have to help them understand what you've done with the research and maybe help them do the research themselves so that they're bought into it, so that they understand how to talk to their users, so that they then believe the results, so that, then they come to the conclusion maybe that their baby is ugly, and, then they come up with some great ideas for how to make it pretty.
All right. What are the pros or some pros and cons of using a service such as usertesting.com, where you can hire participants to use a certain feature or product, and then you get the video of it and their feedback?
Sure. So I've actually used usertesting.com, and I think usertesting.com is fantastic for a very specific type of research. If you want to do very quick, cheap, task-based usability with mostly new users on your web-based product or prototype, it delivers on that. It's a very easy way to do very quick research. Now, would you maybe get better results if you had a phenomenal moderator who could actually follow up on all of the answers, and if you could recruit exactly the right people, and if you sort of did all these other things right? Yes, probably. But it would also cost a lot more money. It would take a lot more time. You might not have that wonderful moderator, and frankly, no moderator is sometimes better than a bad one. I think the danger with some of these products is that people think that those are the only kinds of research that you can do. And I think that there's a wide, wide world of non-task-based, non-usability research that we should be doing. And I think use things like usabilitytesting.com for the things that they do so well, but don't use them for things like will people like this feature? Or, is this for the right market? Or does my messaging work? There are all kinds of better types of research that you can do to answer those different types of questions. But if what you want to learn is, I just made a change to my, new user onboarding funnel, do people find it less confusing? You can send some people through it very quickly. You can get those results. You can share them with your team. It's great.
All right. What do you recommend to startup teams in very early stages who want to have an excellent design?
I recommend that they understand what an excellent design means for their users, because an excellent design for a product that helps me do my taxes is 100% different than an excellent design for a product that lets me throw birds at pigs, or that helps me find a place to eat. Those all have very different needs in terms of visual design, in terms of simplicity versus complexity, in terms of sort of coolness versus just straightforward problem solving. Some products solve very specific problems for people in their jobs, and those you probably want to be just incredibly simple and incredibly easy to use, and just but you probably don't need them to be super cool or flashy or really innovative or interesting, right? But then there are other products that you really do need that. If you're doing something with fashion, maybe you needed to have a specific look and feel. You need to have a much better visual design than a tax product. So design, much like research, encompasses a whole lot of things. So an excellent design might be different for your user base than for my user base than for somebody else's user base.
The $1,000,000 question that I'm being asked many times, I'm sure you are too. When should a startup hire their first UX person?
The second that you build something for a user, you have a UX person, right? Somebody is determining your user experience. My strong recommendation would be to have somebody who is good at figuring out a good user experience before you build anything. Because let me tell you, I get asked a lot of times to come in and fix the user experience. And sometimes user experiences can't be fixed. If you just design them better from the beginning, it's just a better experience for everybody involved. Because a user experience encompasses things like what features go into your minimum viable product. Is a product actually minimum and viable? There's just, when you have somebody who's good at the user experience, who's good at thinking through what the customer is going to do with something, sorry, can we cut this and go back and do this one again? Sorry.
Do you want me to ask again? Or do you want to start from...
Yeah, hold on, let me think. Do you mind asking again? Sorry.
When should a startup hire their first UX person?
So I think that the second that you actually build a product, you put anything out in front of users, you have created a user experience. And so having that user experience person in at the very beginning just makes everything go so much more smoothly. I get asked a lot of times to come in and fix a user experience. What's happened is that they've put something together and they feel like it's not working, and so they've brought somebody in to fix it. And a lot of times I feel like what they're expecting is that, we'll just be able to make it prettier, or we'll be able to move a few things around and that'll fix it. Sometimes the problems, I would say not only sometimes, I would say most of the time, the problems are bigger than that. The problems are at you're not understanding your user. You're not understanding what actually makes a product viable. You're not creating the right environment for users to succeed at the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think you bring the user experience person on right from the beginning. If not bringing a user experience person on, then at least having a product owner who understands the users, who understands how to think through what a user really wants to do. What's the difference between a new user and a a retained user? What's the difference between a power user and somebody who's just a dabbler? What problems are you trying to solve? That's all part of the user experience. The user experience, again, isn't something that you can just come in and polish up and, check off and say, oh, we have good design now. The user experience is every interaction that your user has with your product. That's as important as anything else that you're doing, and it deserves attention and love from the very, very beginning.
Good. Laura Klein, thank you very much for doing this interview with us.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.